If you are struggling to paint white fur, then this video is for you. These are my go-to steps every single time that I paint a white portrait. I use acrylic paint, and that's what I'm using in this video, but you can definitely apply these tips to oil paint as well. Before I do anything, I take a look at my reference photo and kind of do a deep dive to see exactly which colors I need to mix. In Procreate, you just hold your finger down on a spot on the photo and it automatically picks up what that color is. If you're ever unsure about where to even start with some of these colors, it's really helpful to look at the color family that it lives in. So I literally go through and starting with the darkest shades, I kind of swatch them all out, and it's nice to have as a reference as I'm going so I can kind of clear my mind and just focus on those specific colors that I swatched. This reference photo is a great example of this. It's a really good example of all the hidden colors that lie within white fur. For this tutorial, I'm going to be using a pretty neutral background shade to keep the focus on the white fur itself. I personally also like to use the grid method, which I can go into in a separate video if anybody's curious. To save on time, and again, just to keep the focus on the fur, I went ahead and did the eyes, the nose, and part of one of the ears ahead of time. This is the first layer, so it doesn't have to be perfect, but I really want to establish the darkest values first and foremost. My first biggest tip is don't be afraid to go too dark. Acrylic especially lends itself really well to layering. Starting even darker than you might think that you need to go is always a really great foundation to build upon. Really nailing this darkest value will go a long way when it comes time to getting the rest of the shades right. As I'm painting, I'm also keeping in mind that with acrylic paint, everything is going to dry down slightly darker than when the paint is wet. Most of this layer is going to end up covered up, so don't worry if you make any mistakes. Once those are looking good, then I will go in with the next darkest shade. I start out with a kind of purpley shade, but you can see that I switched to a much warmer kind of golden greenish tone here. At this point, we're just establishing a nice foundation for the rest of our layers. And I just keep moving on to the next lighter shade. Each time I go lighter, I'm adding a tiny bit of titanium white. But I'm never using pure white alone. That is my second biggest tip, is to leave the white until the very end. And in some paintings, you might not use pure white at all. This is truly the ugly stage. There are going to be big blobs everywhere. It's going to be really patchy looking. I promise you it's all going to come together in the end. With this first layer, I just want to make sure that all of the canvas is covered and none of that white is showing. For some of these areas, that means just slapping some paint down and calling it a day. And getting into some blues on the left-hand side of the face, I can really start carving out the more light areas. There's a little bit of pinky peach near the ear. Now that I've got my first layer down and I've covered all of the white of the canvas, I am going to re-establish those dark areas with a smaller, more detail-oriented brush. And I'm going pretty dark here to really get the contrast to a place where I want it to be. And here is my third big tip, and that is to just keep an eye on your contrast. It is really easy when you're working in layers with white fur to lose a lot of those dark values. If your contrast starts to fade, then that's when things start to look really flat. So we're kind of doing the process all over again. We're just working in a little bit more detail. We started out with bigger shapes and general areas, and now we're just kind of going smaller and more intricate. At this point, I do a second layer of that background color to make sure that it's completely even and to clean up any of the edges that need some adjustments. Back to some more details, and honestly, there is a lot of back and forth involved in this process. I do love this stage in particular because you can start to really add in the texture of the fur, which is fun. I'd be lying if I said that I got everything right on the first go around, so it is a lot of adjustments. It's a lot of just comparing the photo to my painting. But at the end of the day, since I'm personally a pet portrait artist, my goal is really to capture the essence of the animal itself versus making it look exactly like the photo. So I have a very stylized approach to this. Your approach might be different than mine. This is just how I do things. If you can believe it, I am still not using pure white here. I'm using a color that's pretty close to it, but not quite. And I'm really laying down the lightest areas where there's some highlights. So as I was working, I did notice that we lost a little bit of that peachy pink color that was near the ear, between the ear and the eye. So here is my bonus tip. It's super easy to make small adjustments like this at the very end by using a glazing technique. So I'm going to do that right now. I mix up a very, very diluted version of the shade that I'm trying to tint that area. I just use water as my medium. It's probably really tough to see here, but I am warming up a lot of the side of the face as well. It's just a really good way to make small changes without altering the form underneath that you've worked so hard to create. All right, now it's time for some really small details, the smallest of the smallest. And finally, some pure titanium white. I use this pretty sparingly, but I will admit that sometimes I do go a bit overboard. It's really easy to do that. If you find yourself in that spot, then you can always go back to that glazing technique and kind of mute down any super white areas that you think are a little bit too stark. So to recap these tips, number 1, don't be afraid to go dark. Go darker than you think you need to go. Number 2, save your pure white till the very end or don't use it at all. Number 3, pay attention to your contrast. Make sure that you have a nice range of values so your painting doesn't end up looking flat. And after putting all of the finishing touches and final details, this is my finished painting. I hope that this helped make painting white fur a little bit less scary. If you'd like to see more beginner painting videos, then go ahead and subscribe. I'll be making videos similar to this one. If you'd like to see something specific for a future video, then go ahead and comment below, and that would really help me out. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.